Greetings from Waverley, New York, to the beautiful land of the Philippines. It was in 1968 that I first had the privilege of going to the Philippines, your lovely land. I fell in love with it, and then I fell in love with the people there. And I've had the, shall I say, the privilege of coming many, many times to your land of islands. But in 1973, we had a seminar, a world map seminar in Los Baños, and it was there that God spoke to me about your country and said it was a sheep nation. And also something else that was very important indeed was that it would have a part in the last day revival. And it is for that reason, I believe, among others, that God has raised up this Bible school to produce teachers of righteousness who will indeed prepare the people for the revival that is coming. Something else the Lord spoke to me, and that was this, that you would become a missionary nation. And I must confess that when I have the privilege of traveling the world, I meet so many Filipinos, and they're all on fire for God, and it's so wonderful. And they are having meetings where others could not have them. And so partially these visions are being fulfilled. And then something else that I want to say, and this is the main, shall I say, core of my message. It is that when I was praying for the Bible school, I had the feeling that the whole of the building was enveloped in the spirit of wisdom. And I felt God say to me that one of the purposes, in fact one of the main purposes perhaps, in raising up this Bible school was to manifest the wisdom of God and to impart that wisdom to the pupils and students who would come here. And so I would like to speak a little bit about wisdom, its nature and its character. And we take it from Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 1, where it speaks of the 7 pillars of wisdom. And those 7 pillars are enunciated for us in James chapter 3 and verse 17. The first one is pure. And this is something that we are finding even here in Waverley, that students come from many places, many backgrounds, and we have to spend often quite a long time praying for their deliverance from past sins and from family, shall I say, iniquities. And I don't want you to be ashamed of going to your director, Pastor Norman Holmes, or going to one of the teachers and saying, look, I feel bound by this sin. Will you pray for me that I might be free? You know, sins are very powerful. And in Colossians chapter 1 and verse 21, it speaks of sins alienating our minds. Sins affect our mind and turn our mind from God. And so it's not just a question of saying, well, I committed a sin, I fell into sin or something like that, and confessed it and that's all right. Oh no. There has to be a deliverance, because that is going to affect your mind. And then the Apostle Paul, writing to his beloved, shall I say, son in the faith, Timothy, he says this, he said, flee youthful lusts. Now Timothy was about 26 years of age when he would have received this epistle, and yet the warning is there, even at that age, flee youthful lusts. And also writing to Titus, you know, the Apostle Paul makes this very clear indeed. What is pure religion? What is love out of a pure heart and a good conscience? We must have purity in order to be a vessel of honor, to be a vessel of wisdom. We must apply ourselves to that area in our life if we have bondages there, because it's going to stop our spiritual growth, and also is going to create a flaw in our lives that can bring us tumbling down, as we see so many, shall I say, powerful pastors who have raised up mega churches, and yet they come tumbling down because of flaws that they have not dealt with in their lives. So please, don't be ashamed. Go to your director, Pastor Norman Holmes, or his wife, or one of the teachers, and say, look, I need deliverance. Well, we move on from the first pillar, and we come now to the next one. And the next one is very important indeed. It's peaceable, peaceable. Now, one of the things that God gives to those that please him is his peace. My peace I give unto you. And it's one of the things that we need to appropriate as leaders, because after all, you've come to this Bible school to be trained, not only to be a teacher, but to be a leader. And one of the things that a leader must have is the peace of God. Not just peace with God, but the peace of God. And I'd like to commend to you for study in this area Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8, where he said, be careful for nothing, but in everything, in prayer and supplication, make your request known unto God. And then the peace of God that passes all understanding shall be yours. But you know, one of the things that we have to watch very carefully in this area of peace is our thought life. And just later down, you know, in that same passage in Philippians 4, we are told by the Apostle Paul the things that we must indeed meditate upon it. And he says, all those things that are true, all those things that are honest, all those things that are just, all those things that are pure, all those things that are lovely, good report, any virtue, any praise, then he says, think on these things. So our thought life is going to indeed affect, what shall I say, our peace with God. We can be troubled by wrong thoughts, and so we must clearly check out our thoughts. Are they true? Are they honest? Are they just? Are they lovely? And if they don't pass those tests, reject the thought. Well, then the next pillar is gentle. You know, we've just had a pastor in Zion, Pastor Daniel Karam, who went to India, and there the people in some states are very ferocious and very antagonistic. And God was speaking to him. He said, look, I want you to exude the gentleness of Christ wherever you go, that the people might see the difference between their gods and your God. And so King David made the point. He said, thy gentleness hath made me great. And we want to cry out to God, oh God, let that pillar of gentleness be wrought out in me, so that the gentleness of Christ is exuded from me in every situation. Well, following that, easy to be entreated, easy to be entreated. You know, we have problems throughout the world where people have to make choices, and they will not listen to the wisdom of their elders. They will not listen to the wisdom of their peers. And they go ahead on a pathway that is disastrous. Now then, easy to be entreated. Listen to what your elders, what your teachers say. You know, in the book of Proverbs, it brings out very carefully that I have forsaken the counsel, the teachings of my teachers. And the result is that person has ended up in awful tragedy. Well, we see that unfortunately in many cases. Don't be like it. Easy to be entreated. You know, if your teacher says, look, it's better you don't do that. You know, think before you act, and so forth. You know, pay attention to what they say. It's going to mean life or death to you. And then, moving on, you know, it's full of mercy, full of mercy. We've got to be a merciful people. You know, in my position as president of Zion Fellowship, I have people coming to me and really shocking me with the confessions that they make, and say to me, well, we're willing to give up the ministry, we're willing to do this, that, and the other. Whatever you say, we will do. And then I have to pray. And I say, Lord, what would you do? And he says, I want mercy to triumph over judgment. Mercy to triumph over judgment. You know, where I got that little phrase from, it's a lawyer friend of mine in another state, Bill Finch in Maryland. And he had a case. And the case he thought was iron cast. In other words, he was going to win it. In fact, the opposing lawyer felt the same. It was clearly that Bill Finch's clients had been hit by a car, by a girl in a car, and the result was that they sustained serious injuries. Well, it seemed very clear who was going to win the case. But somehow the jury went for the girl in the car. And Bill lost his case. And so, being a Christian, he walked out of that court room. And he said, Lord, you know what was right. You know what was wrong. You know that my case was right. He said, how do you look at it? And the Lord said, mercy triumphed over judgment. Well, there we are. And so there have been cases where I should have expelled even seasoned pastors because of their conduct. And in fact,